Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing... I don't know exactly what to call this build as terms of, like, classifying it. I wanted to make a bounty hunter type character. And with that, there's many different ways you can go about it. I mean, obviously, we have actual ranger features here that are listed as being a bounty hunter, and we will be using those. But there's definitely various different ways to kind of approach this fantasy of being a bounty hunter. Now, I will list a few kind of, like, quick off the top of my head builds, but I think would work well for this archetype. Thief, Rogue, Ranger, being able to get a ton of expertise and extra bonus action that can fuel various things you can do, as well as being able to, have a lot of skill proficiencies and such like that. Mixing that with probably Hunter Ranger would be really good. Hunter Ranger and Fighter could also work, or Gloomstalker Rogue could also work. I could even see, like, a more religious approach being done with it, maybe going for something like a Cleric as well, maybe like a Nature Cleric mixed with a Ranger. That could all work really nicely. There's definitely different ways of approaching this class fantasy, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. I was inspired by Fallout, which sounds a bit weird, but I really wanted to encourage, kind of get that, like, Wasteland Wanderer type. The cool dude who's proficient in various different weapons, who travels across the, like, various different locations. In the case of Fallout, more of like a wasteland, but here in D&D it's going to be more like fantasy lands and such like that, with a companion of some kind. Whether that companion is a person, or in our case, a more kind of a pet type deal, like an animal companion, one that will stick through them thick and thin, because in that intro, it obviously wasn't the bounty hunter's eyes themselves that were piercing through the darkness, but that of their animal companion. And, I feel like it's a kind of an interesting class fantasy to kind of have this, like, traveler type who travels with a purpose, again, the kind of bounty hunter dead or alive type thing. And in this case, they have, like, their animal companion as well to help them out with that. So in this case, as you could probably guess, we are going to be building a Beastmaster Ranger today, which, as you may know, obviously usually goes to level 11, and in this case, that's not really changing. We do have a 1-level dip that is optional that I do think will elevate this class and the kind of playstyle that I'm going for here quite a bit. But as I've said, you can go for things like Ranger, Fighter, and such like that if you want to maybe drop the animal companion and do a slightly different kind of fantasy. But I think as we go through the leveling process here and I kind of explain why I'm taking certain things and the choices that I'm making, I think you will agree that actually this is a very fun and interesting playstyle that, while simple and probably good for beginners as a result, can result in quite a fun class fantasy, like I said, and a fun way to roleplay the game. Maybe this works better as maybe just a straight up D&D build rather than a build, but I do think for the purposes of playing this game, if you're looking to try out Beastmaster Ranger but you're not really sure how you want to flavor it, this could be a fun way to go. And like I said, this 1-level multi-class dip that we're going to be taking is going to provide a little bit of extra stuff that is going to make this build quite fun, especially when we get into the equipment and such. And speaking of the equipment, since I did decide that maybe this would go nicely as a sort of beginner build, similar to my Enchanter build from a few weeks back, I decided to go for equipment that it can only be obtained kind of in the earlier game, so that this build can come online as quickly as possible. And again, I'll be explaining some sort of like equipment and spell and, like, combos, as well as some strategies here and there. To even though this is a bit more of a simple build, as far as like what I'm showing off here, there is room for like customization and improvements and such like that, and there is some cool things with it. That was a very long intro, so without further ado, let's get into the build. We're going to be kicking things off, unsurprisingly, as a Ranger, as this is going to get us quite a lot of stuff that we want. I have started off as a half Wood Elf here. Wood Elf is going to give us a bit of extra movement speed, and movement speed is going to be a theme of this build, because again, if you want to capture your target alive as a bounty hunter, you need to be able to melee them, because that will deal damage, so being able to close the distance is a good idea, although we are mostly going to be a ranged build. We're going to be a ranged build until we close that distance to deliver the blow. So there's a bit of a melee ranged mix here, which I think is going to be quite fun a playthrough, and as such, Wood Elf is going to help with that. And again, if we're playing with this whole, like, almost druidic kind of nature-themed bounty hunter, then being a wood half-elf also does sense here. And as such, half-elf is also going to give us a few other things, like civil militia, so we're going to get some armor weapon for that. We're going to get dark vision, and we're also going to have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot put us to sleep. So we've got a few cool things to work with here, so that's kind of why I elf. As a ranger, though, we are going to gain access to a couple of things at level 1. Namely, we're going to gain access to simple and martial weapons, like medium armor, as well as shields, which is just a great overall to start with. We also get to choose our favored enemy, which means we're going to get Bounty Hunter right back. With Bounty Hunter, we gain proficiency in Investigation, which is perfect, as well as being able to impose disadvantage on the saving throws against Ensnaring Strike, either ranged or melee. So we are going to be able to reduce our opponent's movement speed as well as increasing our own to be able to have a bit of battlefield control in how we go about things. We're also going to be picking up Natural Explorer to pick up Beast Tamer. Again, the idea of this build is that it's supposed to work with animal companions, both from the Beast subclass as well as Find Familiar. So with Find Familiar that we'll get from Beast Tamer, you're going to have a ton of utility. Want to create a small familiar to send through a small gap to explore the map ahead of you? You can do that. Want a flying familiar that can scout ahead for you? You can do that. If you want a crab, well then you're just a cool person, you know, go with the crab. Like, there's a ton of fun things that can come with having Find Familiar in addition to other things, and yes, you are going to get Scratch in this playthrough, because come on, having the dog companion and like a Fallout-inspired build, you know, dog meat and all that, you kind of have to. So make sure to pick up Scratch in this playthrough. I have Scratch build as well, and unfortunately you can't have the Beast Tamer, Find Familiar, and Scratch up at the same time, but Scratch is going to be able to sniff things out for you throughout your playthrough, which is just super fun. So I definitely recommend having Scratch along the ride on this one. As for our ability scores, it's a pretty standard spread for what is going to be mostly a ranged build. Strength is at 8, but that will get bumped up in a bit, as well as we have Dexterity at 16, as it is going to be our modifier, but again, that could change depending on how you want to do things. Constitution is at 14. This is pretty good for a ranged build overall, since we are mostly going to be range focused. However, there is going to be options into melee, so Constitution at 14 is pretty okay. Intelligence is at 8. As much as I would like this higher, there's not really much room for it on this build with the setup that I have. Wisdom is at 16, because again, it is going to be our main spells, and it is going to affect some stuff that we're later. My Charisma is at 12, because again, when I think of a bounty hunter, I think of someone who is quite intimidating to their targets, so I feel like having a bit of Charisma and being able to pick up Intimidation is pretty important. Picking up skill proficiencies, let's look at that now. So I have made this character as a half-wood elf, meaning we are going to get stealth as well from our race, which is huge. We don't have to pick that up at any certain point, and this build absolutely wants its stealth. I've also gone with the soldier background. Again, that kind of makes sense to kind of get athletics and intimidation, which we are going to be able to make use of build, which is nice. That just leaves our ranger proficiencies. We already have investigation thanks to bounty hunt. And as such, we're also going to be able to pick up insight to tell when your target is lying to you about whether they actually paid off their debt or whatever may have you, as well as perception and survival, because those both just make sense for tracking. So overall, we already have a pretty strong class identity right from level 1 with this bounty hunter ranger type deal. So let's get into the rest of it. At level 2, we are going to gain access to a few things, but I do want to take this multi-class dip right away. You can take it at any level you choose, but I do like picking up this multi-class dip because it is going to give us a few things out and will fit our playstyle. We're going to go with a 1-level dip to Druid. Again, we're kind of going for this like nature vibe anyway, and Druid is going to help us achieve that, but it's also going to give us a ton of utility for this build that I think is going to be extremely useful. Now, this dip is optional. If you want to go all the way to level 12 in Ranger and get that 3rd feat, can. I don't think we're going to need it for the build, and again, you can optimize things further depending on how you want to build this character with later equipment. Like I said, I wanted to focus on, I would say, early to early mid-game equipment here, so that this build can come online quickly, since again, with a single class build, you are going to get that kind of build identity rather early, so again, equipment also works. I would say you should have all the equipment that you need for this build around level 5, which is pretty damn. So let's have a look at what Druid is going to give us. First up, a couple of cantrips. Now again, you can choose what cantrips you think would fit best. Guidance is obviously going to be a really fun cantrip for those improvements, but if you have a cleric in the party, which in Baldur's Gate 3 you most likely do in some shape or form, or at least someone else that can use guidance, probably not going to be necessary for you to have it. So the 2 cantrips that I would recommend is number 1, Whip. It's a nature-themed thing that just feels so perfect for a bounty hunter. It almost gives like an Indiana Jones vibe, being able to pull out the whip, deal a bit of piercing damage, and pull the target close to you so you can get that knockout hit in. It just feels so thematically appropriate for this build, so I really wanted to pick it up. Then obviously there is Shillelagh. We are using a club with this build, so if you wanted to focus a bit more points into your wisdom and use Shillelagh, I hope I'm saying, to give it a bit more bludgeoning damage, as well as being able to use wisdom for the attack rolls, you absolutely can do that if you so choose. But again, there's resistance, making it so you're better at saving throws. Produce Flame could also be a really fun effect for you, and Poison Spray is just another source of damage there as well. But I quite like these two, because they fit the vibe that I'm going for with this build so well. But in addition to that, we are also going to get some spells. Now, the thing is that, again, taking this Druid dip frees up our Ranger spell choices, because there's so many things that I would want to take on this build for various reasons, and Ranger has such a limited amount of spells that can be learned, and we want to focus more on the core Ranger spells for this build. But just taking this one level dip into Druid is going to give us so much more. Namely, Speak with Animals, because that just makes sense for this like animal companion themed Ranger to get this sort of thing, especially if you have Scratch in the party. You can talk to Scratch, which is just awesome, but also any other animals you come across. And again, the targets always think to hide from the humans, they never think to hide from the animals, so an animal could probably give you insight into where your target is going if you're willing to help them out in return by, I don't know, giving them some food. Speaking of food, Goodberry. It just makes so much sense for a traveling bounty hunter who lives off the land to just have Goodberry readily available, being able to give themselves camp supplies and healing on a whim. It just makes too much sense, and again, you're obviously going to chuck one to your animal companions as a treat for a good well done, so yes, Goodberry, absolutely on this build. And finally, it's up to you kind of what you want your last two spells to be here. I would say that Longstrider and Enhanced Sleep obviously both work, and those were my personal picks. Longstrider giving us more movement speed, which again for this build just makes sense, and Enhanced Sleep giving us more traversal ability, which is just so important for a build like this, especially one that's used to traveling. But I could also see Healing Word and Cure Wounds being brought along to be able to heal both yourself and your companions in battle, whether that be the other party members or the animal companion bring with you. I would say that this build might be possible to do a solo run with, maybe not on Tactician or on a mode, especially not, because it does lack some defensive capability, but if you do the stealth stuff right and make good enough use of your companions, you could probably make it work. But I say if you want to try like a bit more of a laxed solo run, maybe on balanced, this build is perfect. But otherwise, I quite like taking Longstrider Enhanced Sleep here, because again, I do think it fits the fantasy that we're going for a bit more to the letter. But anyways, that's what that one level dip of Druid is going to give us, and it just gives us so much utility, so much fun stuff to play around with, and now with the rest of our Ranger levels, we can focus on... Next up, we're going to just go back to Ranger, and we're going to stay here. Like I say, we're going to be playing a Beastmaster. We're going to want to go to features by Act 3. So, at level 2 of Ranger, we're going to get our fighting style. Now, I'm deciding to go with 2-weapon fighting here. This opens up the possibility for dual wielding in both melee and ranged, and I found that in my testing, the kind of aesthetic that I liked the most, as well as the gameplay feature that I wanted the most, was dual wielding crossbows, the hand crossbow dual wielding, because we've not done that in a long time. So 2-weapon fighting is kind of necessary in order to get the offhand damage that we want, and this can help for melee dual wielding as well if you wanted to clubs or something. That could totally work. Archery would obviously also work if you want to have a bonus to your range attacks, but I do feel like 2-weapon fighting is a bit important. If you don't want to go with that Beastmaster kind of like playstyle with this build and you want to maybe go like Hunter Fighter, but you can pick up 2-weapon fighting and archery anyway, it doesn't really matter. Again, like this is just an idea of how to play this class fantasy with like some stuff. If you want to change the build around entirely, go. Next up for our spells, like I say, now we get to focus on important spells for playstyle. So with this, we're going to be picking up Ensnaring Strike, because obviously we want act, as well as Hunter's Mark, literally marking your target, allowing you to do extra damage. Probably going to be one of our only kind of concentration spells that we're going to be using will be these two. Ensnaring Strike for obvious reasons, and Hunter's Mark, again, for obvious reasons. We're mostly going to be using both of these when we cast spells. Hail of Thorns will also be useful, though, and we'll be picking that up in a minute. Next up, at level 3, we get to choose our subclass, and as I've already said, we're going to go with Master to get Ranger's Companion, to give us an animal companion, to keep us company across our out in the wild. But of course, Gloomstalker also works if you want to be able to get the jump on your target, and also be able to hide as a bonus action and such like that. Gloomstalker also fits this fantasy really nicely, but Hunter also works as well, being able to get Hunter Prey, to get something like Colossus Slayer to be able to just do an extra most of your attacks. There's also things like Horde Breaker if you want to be able to attack once. Feel free to just do whatever you want with this, but I really wanted to do Beastmaster because I haven't done it in a while, and as such, I felt like do. So with Ranger's Companion, you're going to gain access to the ability to summon multiple different animals. Wolves, bears, like a dire raven. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with this, and they all gain unique abilities that let them stand out as you level up. So feel free to change out which companion you use on a daily basis, because again, each animal will be in situations, similar to the whole Find Familiar thing. So just use whatever works best for you, or just pick your favorite. I personally used for Wolf for this build, as I felt like I just kind of liked that identity for this kind of fantasy the most, and it comes with some unique abilities when you get into the higher levels that I felt worked build, but obviously choose whatever. We also do get another spell at this level, and of course we're taking Hail of Thorns, giving us a unique ranged weapon attack, which just feels fun to use in. Next up, at Ranger level 4, we are going to get to choose our first feat build. I would recommend most likely taking a bump to Dexterity here, to give your ranged attacks a bit more chance to hit. Wisdom is fine at 16 for this build, because again, Hunter's Mark is not a saving throw, so we can just use that whenever, and in Snaring Strike, our enemies are going to have disadvantage on saving throw, so even at 16 Wisdom, they're still probably going to be pretty likely to get to hit, so we don't have to worry about that too much. So let's bump up our Dexterity for now. At Ranger level 5, we are going to gain access to extra attack, as well as the subclass feature Companion's Bond, which means our Animal Companion will now add our proficiency bonus to its armor class and damage rolls, which is awesome. Our Companion just got a lot powerful. We're also going to get access to level 2 spells at this point, and I'm going to recommend picking up Parts Without Trace. A lot of this build, especially if you kind of want to try the solo route, is going to be focused around stealth and getting kind of in and out of things with minimal trouble. Basically, you just want to be taking out your targets and nothing else. So Pass Without Trace is going to give you and your animal companions a bonus to stealth, and also any of the other party members you tend to bring. I think this build could probably be paired nicely with like Starion, Shadowheart, if you're keeping the Trickery Cleric route, could also be quite fun. I'm not sure who else. Maybe Gale? I don't know. You'll have to figure that one out for yourself, but Pass Without Trace is definitely going to be a fun thematic spell that just fits with what we're going for here. So I'd recommend picking it. At level 6 of Ranger, we're going to get to choose an additional favourite enemy, Natural Explorer. For our favourite enemy, we're going to be going with, well, I mean, it's up to you kind of what you want to choose here. Keeper of the Veil will give you proficiency in Arcana and protection from evil and good. Doesn't really fit the vibe of the build, but you could go with that if you like. There's Mage Breaker, which would give us access to Armor and True Strike. I'll get back to that in a minute. Ranger Knight would give you access to Heavy Armor if you decided to Heavy Armor with this build, as well as proficiency in History. Could definitely work. A Sanctified Stalker, again, if you're kind of thinking that religious route might be a bit interesting, would give you access to Religion proficiency as well as Sacred Flame. I'm actually going to be choosing Mage Breaker specifically to hunt down magic or targets. True Strike may seem a bit useless for the most part, but think about this for a minute. It gives you advantage on your next attack roll. With dual-wielding hand crossbows, you are actually going to be able to attack as a bonus action, which means True Strike does kind of work here. Especially when we inevitably pick up the Sharpshooter feat in a minute, getting advantage on your attack rolls with True Strike could be pretty damn nice if you want to make sure you get that one attack off fairly consistently. Obviously, though, you will be giving up your extra attack, so we will have other ways of getting advantage. But again, I feel like ranged characters picking up True Strike just feels right to me in a lot of ways, as well as the fact that if maybe there's a mod that maybe updates some of these spell effects to work with, you know, the 2024 rules where True Strike gets a bit of a buff, there may be some fun combos there. But for now, we are just going to pick up this because our build thematically. We also do get to pick up another Natural Explorer, and of course we're going to go with Urban Tracker, because again, that just makes sense for the build, giving us proficiency in Sleight. Next up, we are going to get level 7 of Ranger, giving us exceptional training, meaning that our animal companion can now dash, disengage, and help us as a bonus action, which is just absolutely amazing. We're also going to get access to another spell at this point, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick up here. There's two options as far as I'm concerned, that's Spike Growth and Silence. Silence would be great if you wanted to silently target. This also disables potentially tricky spellcaster enemies. So I feel like, again, if you're going after a spellcaster, being able to cast Silence on them, and then take them down just makes a lot of sense. But if you want to go for battlefield control, then Spike Growth does also work, dealing piercing damage, as well as being able to make it so your enemies have a harder time moving, reducing their movement speed, while again, we can increase ours to make sure that we're capturing our target necessary. So I like Spike Growth a little bit more here, but again, Silence does also fit this fantasy quite well. Next up, at level 8, we're going to gain access to our Lance Stride ability, which means that difficult terrain no longer slows us down, which again is perfect for what we're going for here. We also do get another feat at this level. It's our last feat of the build, so we are going to be picking up Sharp Shooter, being able to take a -5 penalty to our attack rolls, but deal an additional 10 damage with ranged weapons. And also our ranged weapon attacks do not receive penalty from high rules. This basically just makes us extremely powerful. Again, we are sacrificing a bit of our spellcasting ability in order to do this, but again, our two main spells, Hunter's Mark, and what's it called? Ensnaring Strike, are both going to still work well regardless, so it's absolutely fine. Next up, at Ranger level 9, we are going to gain access to level 3 spells. I quite like Lightning Arrow here. I kind of went for almost like a mechanical crossbow theme with this build as well, so I actually did buff them with lightning damage from the Drakethroat Glaive, so Lightning Arrow here also kind of fits that vibe, basically allowing us to do a big chunk of lightning damage with like a charged shot attack that can spread to other enemies that are nearby. I think this is a really fun spell. We don't get this very often in this game, so I'm quite happy to pick it up here. At level 10 of Ranger, we're going to get quite a few things. We're going to get Hide in Plain Sight, allowing us to become invisible and gain a +10 bonus to our stealth checks as long as we stand still. So if we're dealing with patrolling guards that are going to be walking past us, we can just quickly use this. And it lasts until a long rest, and we just use it as an action, and we can use it as much as we like. So it's not a crazy feature, but it definitely has its niche uses. We also do gain access to another favourite enemy. Pick whatever you like here. We've kind of covered mostly everything. So kind of just pick the skill proficiency that you would want out of Ranger Knight and Sanctified Stalker. I might go with Sanctified. Ranger Knight obviously does well. We also gain access to Natural Explorer, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. I went with Wasteland Wanderer Poison because it does feel like it makes the most sense. If you're someone who travels a lot and lives off the very nature inclined, you probably have built up resistance to poison at some point. So I quite like having this here. So we're going to pick it. Finally, at Ranger level 11, we're going to get Bestial Fury, meaning that our Animal Companion now gains extra attack, and at this point as well, our Animal Companion will also get a lot of their unique abilities that make them. So we definitely wanted to go this high. We're also going to get to choose another spell, and we're going to pick up Conjure Barrage, giving us another kind of weapon attack that works at both. No, go away, go. And that is the build. Overall, like I say, it's fairly simple. It's 11 levels of Beastmaster Ranger with a 1 level Druid for some utility options. Again, for a beginner who wants to kind of play a Ranger and likes the idea of having an animal companion, because let's be honest, that is the pretty common kind of class fantasy that the Ranger is known for, then this is a really cool way of doing it, being able to give yourself a lot of movement speed while restricting your enemies, and just being able to kind of take an approach to combat that fits your playstyle. Go for stealth, go for like team tactics with Animal Companion, you can do a lot of stuff. In fact, rest, we can get our Animal Companion back, because options in a minute. But obviously you have a lot of things working for you here. You've got, you know, Long Strider, Enhanced Leap, Shillelagh Thorn, you got all the kind of cool based stuff that's going to make this playstyle seem really fun. Again, it is a simple build, but building it in this very specific way does give you a lot of stuff to work with. But now, let's take a look at the equipment. And as a reminder, most of this equipment is available in Act 1, if not early Act 2, so this is going to come online pretty quickly, but that does mean that once you get to later Act 2, Act 3, beyond, you can upgrade this build with some other stuff. But let me kind of get into like the equipment that I have selected and my reason for it. First up, we have the Club of Hill Giant Strength, can be obtained in Act 1. It is a club that is going to set our strength, I should say, to 19, giving us powerful strength-based effects. As so now we're quite strong, we can, you know, lift things, throw things, jump really high, which lets us get to vantage points for our, you know, ranged attacks. It's very, very good. Honestly, I would just keep this on the build pretty much consistently, and I also kind of wanted like a blackjack type thing. So we have like a melee weapon that is designed for knocking people out rather than killing them. Kind of similar to like the Thief series in a way. So yeah, we're basically going to be using this thing to knock out our targets, like a blackjack. So it kind of just fit the build overall. And again, this works with Shillelagh if you wanted to go for maybe like a more wisdom route. If you wanted to bump up your wisdom, you could go for that. Maybe if you didn't take that level of Druid and you bump up your improvement or whatever. And if this would bump up the damage, but obviously it would change the attack and damage rolls from your strength, which technically is higher, to your wisdom, but, you know, it can still work. Yeah. So here we have, yeah, you see it does 1d8 plus 3, and it does a bit more damage overall with that. But of course, you know, you can kind of chop and change what you there. Maybe you don't even need Shillelagh on this build, you can just swap it out with something else. But I think the Club of Hill Giant Strength is quite a fun weapon build, so I wanted to cut that here. Of course, as well, we have our dual crossbows. Now, you could just use any kind of regular hand crossbows you come across in the game up until these, because they are pretty easy to find. Usually most vendors have them, but they can also be found as just generic options. But the two hand crossbows that I always use for any build that I make that uses this kind of playstyle is the Hellfire hand crossbow and the Nissa. The Hellfire hand crossbow is just an easy to obtain +2 hand crossbow that you can pick up in Act 2. It can possibly inflict burning while hitting a creature while you are hiding or invisible, which of course is build. And it comes with the ability to cast Scorching Ray Shot, which just gives you the ability to use Scorching Ray while short rest at level 3, which is really, really nice. Buff this up with the Drakethroat Glaive, twin casted using Sorcerer, which is why I get party, and you can add an additional 1d4 damage of your choice to this. As I said, I've gone with Lightning, so this is doing a pretty decent damage and becomes a +3 weapon rule. Twin casting that as well onto the Near Misser, which comes with exclusively force damage, which is going to be great for handling objects and enemies that have resistance to piercing damage, as well as pumping the extra lightning damage on top of this. You get a +2 hand crossbow with that is basically entirely magical, which can be really, really helpful. So yeah, and it also comes with a casting of Magic Missile at level 3 as well, if you want to do some curved shots around corners. So overall, two very, very fun weapons. Let's build. Now, as we get into the clothing, a lot of this is mainly just for fashion purposes. Feel free to upgrade and chop and change as you see fit, but if you want to get the look right, here's how you go. We have the Marksmanship Hat, which gives you a +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls and thrown attack rolls. This is going to help offset the penalty from Sharpshooter and also look like an absolute badass while wearing it. In addition to this, we have the Padded Armour, which lets you Padded Armour +2, which lets you take 2 less bludgeoning damage in armor class 15, mixing that with our relatively high dexterity, and we come out with an AC of 17, which could be better, but obviously isn't too bad. Again, this is mostly here for fashion. Throw on like Studded Leather or the Elegant Studded Leather in Act 3 or something if you really want to bump this up, but come on. You can't deny how badass this looks with the Talos dye from the new dye mods that are available on Nexus. I gotta remember to get the name, but it's definitely, I think it's like the Faerunian Colors mod, but let me know about that. But obviously, it looks absolutely badass, and I love this outfit on my Origin build, and it's still good here. The Padded Armor +2 will appear in vendor inventories from level 4 on, so you can get it filled. Next up, the Gloves of Baneful Striking. Can't remember if I've ever used these in a build. They're a set of gloves you can get really early on that have a unique synergy with this build. Whenever you deal a damage with a weapon attack, the target receives a 1d4 penalty to its saving throw against your next spell. So for us, that could be Ensnaring Strike, Hail of Thorns, any of this stuff, really. And why does this work? Well, the thing is you cast those spells as an action, right? But because we can make a weapon attack as a bonus action thanks to the fact that we're dual-wielding crossbows, that means that we can use our bonus action crossbow attack to inflict the Bane condition, essentially, and then cast the spell with our action on the same turn to get our enemy exactly where we want them. It's just a unique bit of synergy that you can pick up really, really early on into your campaign, but if you wanted to swap this around maybe for the Gloves of Dexterity, so you can dump Dex and put those other things like Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma, as well as there's also the opportunity to do things like the Legacy of the Masters to get a bonus chance to hit damage. There's a bunch of different things you could do with this, but I just wanted to show off this combo because again, this is meant to be kind of like a build with an early game start, and again, I just want to use different equipment that I don't often use. Which is why it's stupid that I have the Boots of Speed here, because I use these all the time. The Boots of Speed are just so useful for ranged builds, giving you access to a bonus action dash that imposes disadvantage on opportunity attacks against you. As a ranged build that is going to be in and out of melee as well, just being able to get into the position that you want to basically for free, in addition to all of our other movement speed buffs, It's just too good to pass up, so I absolutely recommend these boots. They are one of the best in the game. A rogue that can already do this. And look, that was Scratch. There he goes. He's in the bottom corner. You can see his tail wagging. Scratch, thanks for joining the video. Anyways, nope, there he goes again. He's gone back the other way now. Anyways, next up for our accessories, we have the Amulet of Misty Step, allowing you to cast Misty Step once per short rest. So if you absolutely need to get somewhere, you can use this. But feel free to chop and change this out for anything that you like. It doesn't need to be here. It's just more options. Next up, the Strange Conduit Ring. While concentrating on a spell, which between Ensnaring Strike and Hunter's Mark, we're pretty much going to be doing all the time anyway, all of our weapon attacks are going to deal an additional 1d4 psychic damage. It's just more damage. With this, we're going to be, and Sharpshooter, we're going to be doing like, and the Drake for a Glaive buff. Let's see, that's 10, plus a flat 10, plus 2d4 psychic and whatever element you choose. This build is doing a lot of damage. Now, with this build, I did showcase a few different ways to get advantage. True Strike, that's an option. There's also the fact that you can tide and then get advantage that way. There's a few different ways of going about it, but if you want, and also flanking with your animal companion and your other party members can also work for advantage as well. That's all very good. But with the Risky Ring, this is an optional thing that if you feel like you're not getting hits consistently enough, the Risky Ring will give you advantage on all attack rolls, but you'll receive disadvantage on saving throws. This is definitely a double-edged sword for this build. If you're not too good at maybe like setting up your animal companions or other party members properly, so that you're consistently getting advantage on enemies with your attacks, then the Risky Ring might be able to help you. But do be warned that the Risky Ring obviously advantage on saving throws, meaning that things like Hunter's Mark and Ensnaring Strike can drop easily with our middling Constitution score, save proficiency. So I would say if you're going to be throwing on the Risky Ring, you're probably going to want to stick to, like, until the very last second when you knock out your target, you're going to want to stick to the very, very, very far distance and just use range combat as much as you can to avoid getting hit together and enemies focus on your party members instead. But again, if you're good enough with like your positioning and all of that, you shouldn't need the Risky Ring, so feel free to replace it with something else. Otherwise, the Risky Ring is kind of a crutch to make this playstyle work for people. So I would definitely kind of like pick and choose if you want to use this or not. There are other rings that I could recommend. The Caustic Band, which just had a flat 2 acid damage to everything you do, kind of like a corrosive arrow. Arrows! You can also use special arrows with this build. Our Ranger comes with an Arrow of Ice by default, but if you're picking this up throughout the campaign, that is going to be very, very helpful. Pick up and craft as many unique arrows as you can. Use the Alchemy system. I believe that lets you craft special arrows as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, play around with that as well, because that could be a cornerstone of the... I would also say maybe the Elixir of Arcane Acuity could also help for the spellcasting side of things, but that's getting sidetracked. In fact, actually, the combat footage should be playing right now because there's not much else to say about the build. Overall, I'll talk about the combat footage and the testing that I went through. As I said, offensively, this build does really, really well. Battlefield control. This build is pretty damn good at it, giving yourself high maneuverability and being able to control what your enemies do. Defensively, though, this build does have some issues. You're definitely going to want to focus on like a hit and run playstyle with this build, which is this build is just perfect at. But being hit means you're going to get hit pretty hard. I test all my builds on Tactician and on Tactician difficulty. Again, with solo testing, if my enemies decided to try and focus me down, if my positioning was a bit off, you're going to take some... the main character is going to take some damage. You definitely want to make sure your animal companions are doing the work for you. Whether you bring the wolf or the bear or the boar, those are all pretty tanky options. You're definitely going to want to make sure that they are taking the hits for you and being kind of like the frontliner while you stay on the back. And if that goes well, and again, most people will be playing this with party members, whereas I test all my builds solo, you will get a lot more mileage out of this. But if you're trying to do this solo, you're gonna have to play a bit more carefully. Again, this build is not meant to be overpowered. It's meant to be just the right level of power to make this build feel good, and again, indulge in that class fantasy of being this like druidic bounty hunter, which I definitely think we've done. But like I say, it's not my strongest build out there, and I will readily admit that. So if it's not your bag, if you're more of a power building type character, then again, I would say go for a fighter, hunter, ranger mix, which is going to do so much better for you. But anyways, I think that's pretty much it as far as what I want to say about this build. Like I say, it is a really fun build. If you want to play the more classic archetype of ranger, this is how you do it. It's a really fun fantasy, and like I say, there's room for improvement and upgrades here. Mirror of Lost shenanigans, Auntie Ethel's hair shenanigans. Like, there's a bunch of different stuff that you can do with it, but as a basic kind of idea presented as a concept for beginners just playing unbalanced and wanting to play this archetype, then here you go. Otherwise, I would say there's other options out there if you max and optimize, but I still think this is a really fun build, and played correctly, it does work. Again, I really like to think about the roleplay side of things, again, because with Baldur's Gate 3, you're supposed to roleplay your character. And again, having your fine familiar animals darting around, having and getting into places that other party members can't, scouting ahead and all that, Scratch being able to sniff things out for you, having your animal companions with their various abilities. You do feel like this kind of, like, badass Lone Ranger type with, like, the animal companions, again, like Fallout. I don't know, I like this, and I want to build it, and I wanted to build it, but I feel like perhaps with mods coming out, I might revisit this in the future. Once console mods have access to the, once console players, I should say, have access to mods, I will definitely be doing a level 20 variant of this build, which goes to a level 11 Beastmaster, but also gains, like, levels in other classes. In fact, I'd like to revisit a lot of my older builds. That's funny, because again, there's so much more that can come there. But anyways, that is going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video regardless, even though it's probably not one of my best, if we're being real, and I'm terribly sorry for the delay with this video. You know, I've been pretty sick. Again, working in the field that I do, you're going to get sick pretty often, and oh man, I got hit pretty hard, but I was able to kind of get a second wind of energy today in order to get this out for you guys. But unfortunately, there's no stream this weekend. I'm going to get back into streaming soon, I promise, because I've been meaning to do the final deity build stream. We're going to be doing the Dead 3 build stream soon. It's going to happen. I just need to find the time and the energy and the physical health to do it. So, in fact, I can start to feel my going now, which is not good. So I'm going to end this video here. So much for watching. See you all next.